or how do I get out of here?
No, not at all. I mean, he was a very calm, deliberate, brilliant person. It's like being able to sit down next to Einstein and have just a friendly conversation and understand what he's saying.
Okay. I get that. No, I mean, you understand why I would ask that, though. I mean, a lot of people would be, might feel uncomfortable around a conversation like that, especially this was in the 90s, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, it was it was in the mid to late 80s. It was before I retired in 87.
Okay, so you were still in the service.
Yes, and I lived in San Antonio, not far from Southwest Research, and I knew his son, and that's how I met him, and we just hit it off. I mean, his son was basically non-technology-wise and had no interest in that, and I think they had a very strained relationship, but even though he was a lot older than me, I just was very attracted to his knowledge, and because I love technology and science, and when you've got somebody like that that's patient with you, that explains things on your level, and allows you to ask dumb questions, it's like having a mentor in a way.
Yeah, I get that. And you met quite a few people during that time period. And again, this goes to the inspiration for writing the book Alien Rapture in the first place, is these feelings of you could call it anger, that the American government was hiding this sort of technology, and that spurred the whole thing.
In 1987, when I retired after 20 years, I was basically medically disabled. I had heart surgery. Every disc and vertebrae in my back was messed up. My diabetes was out of control. I could go on and on. And when I started writing the book by the early 90s, say 93 or so, or 4 or 5, the doctors basically said, man, you're only going to live another year or two. He says, you've outlived your Dacron graft that they put in your heart. It was only supposed to work for 10 years. You've had it for 30. I had this huge, and still do, aneurysm in my abdominal aorta down near belly button. So I had all these things, and he said, you're a ticking time bomb. So it's a miracle you lived this long. So I kind of had a fatalistic attitude that even if the government came after me, I wasn't going to live that long anyway. So it was like, hey, I'll get the last laugh. So that's why I stuck my neck out as far as I did. Originally, we were just going to come out with a fiction book and hope people could read between the lines and realize it was true, except obviously the aliens and the ending of the book. But then all of a sudden, I got away with that, and Brad Steiger and Bob Silverstein put together a series of TV interviews, radio interviews, one right after another, several times a day for that week that I was at Laughlin. The BBC flew over a team of 6 people and interviewed me for like 6 hours. Of course, they only ended up using like 7 minutes of it in Real of the Skies. And then the German TV, which I never saw because it was POW, did an hour-long special on the Triangle after a long interview with me. And then I did radio shows like Jeff Rentz and Bill Boshears and a whole bunch of other people, and several smaller TV stations sent a crew. And then also gave a presentation to MUFON in Los Angeles. So we hit so many places in a week and we've come out with a small publisher and published this because the big publishers wouldn't touch the book.
Right, which is unusual considering it's, Brad Steiger, and anybody in this field who knows about Brad Steiger knows the guy's written like a ridiculous amount of book, and
it's 160, 170 books published, and none of them are self-published.
Right.
And he's had big publishers, and Bob Silverstein was considered the golden boy of the book publishing world. I mean, he he did the book deals and movie deals for books like Chariots of Fire. He had never been turned down.
Right.
And they thought, like, this is fishy. We think you guys are revealing classified information. And they wouldn't touch it.
Okay. Yeah, because the whole scene at the end of the book, I'm not going to give it away, obviously, but that was just something that was added. It wasn't a real event, but it was just perspective.
It was, after talking to Dr. Farr and other people, I took literary license and made a jump to conclusion that this is possibly one tangent that the human race could take,
right,
to advance us to the next evolutionary step. And
right.
Like I said, the aliens and the ending is just totally hypothetical.
Right, of course. But now, weren't you supposed to be on Art Bell's show back then?
I was scheduled for Art Bell. Brad Steiger did a weekly show, usually with Art Bell and also Jeff Rentz. And he talked to Art Bell about me twice, sent him a copy of the book. Art Bell said the book was extremely fascinating to him, and he had so many questions for me. And they scheduled me and then canceled. And they scheduled me again a week or two later and canceled me again. And Brad just kept apologizing. He said, I don't know what the hell's going on. He said, it's almost like he'll have all these crazy people on there, but he won't have somebody on there that actually has credentials.
Yeah, and going into that, we're going to come back to this, but just quickly, you put all of your military records out. When you did the BBC, didn't you show them a whole bunch of your military records?
Yes, I had about 900 documents that I saved from the military, and I threw away more than that because they were just irrelevant to anything I might ever need, like through the VA or whatever. And I showed the BBC, MUFON, the International UFO Congress, their whole staff, including Ken Sedden and Bob and Terry Brown, about 200 documents. They showed my security classifications, my training, my medals. I had 3 meritorious service medals, which is good for even a general. And I had 2 commendation medals. I had a Vietnam Medal for Valor, which is heroism. I had Presidential Unit Citation, Outstanding Unit Citation, many medals and awards that I was very proud of. And you know, I know people that go through their whole career and get 1 commendation medal and only dream about meritorious service medals.
Right.
So I showed them all that. And what happened is the BBC behind my back, I told them, I said, you can't take any pictures of my documents that have my Social Security number in it. So while they're filming me, there's one of their assholes had a camera and was taking pictures of documents that had my Social Security number on it. So when they come out with Real of the Skies, my old Social Security number is right there. They show a document with my old Social Security number. I couldn't believe it.
Oh, my God.
So, you know, that's why I don't trust the media much.
Yeah. Okay, so I just wanted to get that information out there that you had provided your military records to
Yes, and I've posted a few select ones, like my performance report that General Doran signed, and my civilian performance report at CEA when I was a senior program manager working under Colonel Barry McKeon. He had retired, but he was a decorated SR-71 pilot and a close friend of mine.
Right. So just now that we've set that ground, we're going to go back to the Art Bell interview. Did Brad Steiger eventually contact Art and say what's going on?
He just said that after thinking about it, he wasn't interested, which totally baffled Brad. And Brad says, "Hey, this guy has a document that shows he was assigned to Detachment 3 in the summer of '79, which you well know is Groom Air Base." And Art says, "Yeah, but we can't prove any of that's real." And Brad says, well, hell, I vouch for him. So anyway, that's it. I really believed after that, and listening to Art Bell for a couple of years, that he didn't want people on there with real credentials for the most part. He had fringe people on there. The wilder their stories, the better.
Right, and it's just unusual that happened. You sort of got blocked from going there. But you had a busy time during that period doing lectures. Your MUFON presentation is up on YouTube, available, thanks to Alien Scientist. A lot of your information's out there. I think your book was even put out for free, wasn't it?
Last I checked, it was on Scribed.
Okay.
I'm currently rewriting it, adding some things that have come back to me since I wrote the book, which explains some of the technology and other things that I wanted to go into more detail. See, the original book, 30% of the book was cut out by the publisher.
Oh, okay.
For one reason or another. So all I'm doing is editing the pre-Blue Line draft that was the full-length story. And I'm going to put it up on Alien Scientist and sell it as an ebook for $2 or something like that, and so we can generate some funds for Alien Scientist research.
Okay, good. Charles, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, how close have you been to alien technology that's either in its original state or back engineered?
I don't think I've ever seen any technology that was in its original state. In other words, I never saw Star Wars weapons or stuff like that. I saw what the military had that was extremely advanced, far more advanced.
More advanced than what we should have our hands on.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, with that computer, I mean, it was 20 years ahead of its time. Now, most people find that hard to believe. They'll say, well, look at the circuitry. You can see how it was developed, how it got better. Well, yeah, how did it get better? How did it originate? I mean, our technology advances since the 60s. It's just incredible. It's almost unbelievable. Our technology's growing so fast, especially like in the material science with nanotubes and quasi-crystals and other exotic materials. It just, people can't keep up, even in their own fields. There's breakthroughs every day.
Right. Absolutely.
And it's totally unexplainable. I mean, how do you go 50,000 years from the invention of the wheel, and you still got a wheel that's being greased with ox fat and made out of wood?
Yeah, I get it. It's pretty unusual. What about? I mean, do you still have contacts in the Black Ops programs that tell you stuff, or is that just faded away?
Well, hell, over half the people I knew are dead. And I should have died long before them, because they were in good health when we started researching the book. And now here I am in the same miserable health I've been all these 30-plus years, and I'm still here talking, which just baffles me. So if I had contacts on the inside, I wouldn't talk about it. But I'm not without my own resources.
Mm-hmm. I guess what I was asking there is, are they still giving you information about programs that have been going on? And, of course, that would, at this point, have to fall into the hearsay category. But what is that information that they're telling you? I mean, where would be the state of the technology today?
The only thing I'd bet my life on that I have been told a few things about is that we have a space fleet off the Earth. And, for example, the Flying Triangle was a platform. It was massive. You can imagine the amount of personnel and equipment they could take to the moon or Mars or somewhere, and it's big enough that it could be its own space base or space platform.
What do you mean by massive? How big would that be?
Well, the operational model was 600 feet.
Okay, that's huge.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you could take enough equipment with you to set up moon bases or build different facilities, make our space station look like, a little tiny trailer behind your car.
Yeah, it's like a tin can, really. So when Richard Dolan talks about a breakaway civilization, that there are technologies being utilized that are so far beyond what NASA's doing and what they're doing in the aircraft industry, that it is almost like a civilization that's broken away from the mainstream science and technology.
No, I absolutely believe that. I absolutely believe that has been happening since at least the early 80s, if not sometime in the 60s. It baffles me that so many people don't believe in any of this stuff. There's so much evidence out there.
Right. So they would be, in a way, they would be separate from us. I mean, they certainly can't. I've talked about this before. Who are they going to talk to? I mean, they can't talk to mainstream people. They can't talk to mainstream scientists. They can really only communicate with each other. If they're aware of the advanced technology and the breakaway civilization, they can really only communicate to each other. They can't step outside of that circle.
Well, exactly. The whole time I was in the 12 years I was married to my first wife, she would think I was at a school somewhere and I was on a black program. Because before the fall of the Soviet Union, nobody talked about anything. In fact, it was illegal to even use the name NRO or NSA. We used to call it no such agency.
Okay. What's NRO stand for?
That's the National Reconnaissance Office, and that was classified. So, I mean, people didn't tell their wives. You did your work. It was like a parallel universe, and then you went home once you left work, and you left work at work, and that was all there was to it. Wives ask questions. Oh, I just worked on equipment all day.
Oh, okay.
Very boring. It wasn't. It was very exciting.
Of course it was. So, like I said, the people in these sort of programs, these very advanced programs, if they're on these platforms or the space fleet that you're talking about, then they're separate from us. They're a separate civilization.
Well, it was like when they sent Columbus took the original ships to the Americas. I mean, they were half a world away, cut off completely.
Right.
And they took people and started establishing small towns, and some of them didn't make it, and some did. But it would take, a week, I think, or something to get from England or Spain to North America. And that was no different than back then. The people would hear, oh, we've discovered North America, and it's endless resources, a bountiful land. I mean, it would be like when we first saw people land on the moon. Right. It would have been shocking. Everybody would have been talking about it.
Right. So, but these guys keep pretty much to themselves.
Yeah, but they're explorers. And my God, I mean, somebody says, hey, you want to volunteer to go to the moon and work or go to Mars and work? It's like, you'd kill to have a job like that.
Yeah, and you'd be willingly keeping your mouth shut. And, to do something as exciting as that, what are you going to do, jeopardize it by telling everybody at a dinner party that you work on Mars?
Well, not only that, a lot of, I don't want to get into 9/11, but there are some people that disappeared because the real story is bullshit. If you had a high-profile person that needed to disappear and you didn't want to kill them, you say, hey, we get this huge moon colony or Mars colony. How'd you like to go up there? And that way you can start all over again. Now, what you got to realize is that when Hal Puthoff ran the remote viewing project at Stanford Research Institute in California, his best remote viewer was a guy named Ingo Swann, who wrote a book called Penetration, which you can find Penetration on Scribe. And in the last couple of chapters, he writes about all the huge facilities on the far side of the moon, which some people call the dark side of the moon.
True. Yeah, I mean, it's entirely possible that this is an absolute reality, that this breakaway civilization exists, and there's stuff going on that we just don't know about. And perhaps some of those things we're seeing in the sky that we're identifying as alien technology and alien crafts are human-made back engineering.
Oh, absolutely. I think, back in the day, maybe in the 50s or something, maybe 2% were actual alien UFOs. If you look at all the reports and investigations back then, the military things that have been released, there were absolutely things that generals like Twining said they're not from Earth and they're visiting us.
Yeah.
But nowadays, since the 70s, 80s, and on, our own space vehicles will just keep multiplying. I mean, think about it. Why, when we retired the SR-71, they said we don't need it anymore, we got satellites. Well, that's bullshit, because even the KH-11 keyhole and KH-12 keyhole satellites the NSA had used hydrogen thrusters, and there was a limitation on how much they could move around. So they came out with the SR-75, also called Penetrator, and replaced it, which has been spotted a number of times around the world. And then I talked about a vehicle called the Scramp, which was the SR-74 that rode on back of the SR-75 up to about 80, 90, 100,000 feet, and then it took off and went into orbit, which is exactly, what is it, the X-37 or 47 now?
Oh, the one that's riding on the back of the other plane that takes off and goes, yeah, okay, got it.
Goes on. So, I mean, anytime they publicly release new technology, NASA's that way. If NASA's saying, oh, we've invented something or we've discovered something or we're going to build this, it's because it's hand-me-down technology.
Right.
It's already been either put in production or rejected.
It's old news. It's old tech.
I mean, I call the space shuttle the old yellow school bus, because even when they put up the space shuttle, it was old technology.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Okay, have you ever been in an underground base?
I've been in underground tunnels at Buckley Field outside of Denver in the early 70s, where they had massive several-story buildings underground, and they built those huge geodesic domes with radar to track movement in space, whether it was space vehicles or space debris or whatever. And then also at Edwards Air Force Base at the JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory facilities that was run out of UCLA Goldstone in California.
Okay. Okay, now are you aware of any other underground bases? Not been in, but aware of.
When I was at a facility called DARK, originally I thought it was S4 because of Bob Lazar's lies, and I've corrected that mistake and admitted I made a huge leap there that was wrong. It went, as far as I know, at least 10 stories underground, and it was massive. I mean, you could see main hallways that would just fade off in the distance.
And is that DARC as in D-A-R-C?
Yes, Defense Advanced Research Center. And that was somewhere south or southeast of Groom Air Base, but it wasn't at Papoose. In fact, there's been geologists and drone engineers and everything else use Papoose and said, there's no facilities there. There's no damn parking lot or buildings on the side of the mountains or vehicles parked around outside a secret entrance. They'll all just flat tell you it's total bullshit. And the fact is S4 is at Tonopah. It's a radar site.
Okay.
And, of course, all these years, everybody listens to that Bob Lazar, and they go, look, he was at Papoose at S4. And I said, no, he wasn't. He heard about that because he had a relative working at Tonopah. And he mentioned a classified radar area that was S4. that back then Lazar told all these lies, hundreds and hundreds of lies, because there basically wasn't the internet in 1988. It wasn't internet until the late 90s to speak of. So he never thought he'd get caught because everybody would be comparing notes and looking shit up.
Right. So you think this underground base was somewhere else?
No, I think there's an underground base at in or around Groom Air Base, and I had people tell me that there was this tram system, some type of electric vehicle like a train, high speed, that ran from Edwards Air Force Base, North Base, to Area 51, Groom Air Base.
Oh, okay.
Because when I was down in the JPL tunnels, a lot of the side tunnels are only like 20 feet across, and they would take concrete and flatten out the bottom eighth or whatever to where you walked, and they had gas lines, electric lines, all kinds of cables and lines down there, and then there were doors that you need a key card, and a personal code that the circular area around the doors was like 30 feet wide. Now, you can get some pretty large vehicles in a 30-foot wide tunnel.
Absolutely. And especially if this thing's, like you said, several layers below the ground. It's a multiple layer facility.
Well, I had a friend, Dave Lewis, who I work with at Nellis. We're kind of drinking buddies and pool buddies and all that, but he used to talk all the time about his brother being up in Area 51, and he'd see these boring machines that were 30-foot round. They operated them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, excavating underground.
Okay.
The tunnels, and then they'd also run parallel tunnels and then get in there and flatten them out to where they could build buildings inside them.
Now, Phil Snyder came out and talked about that. He eventually was murdered, but I mean, he came out and gave a few lectures on that as well.
Yeah, I don't know if I've heard the name. I don't remember ever watching any of his stuff. My problem with ufology, actually it's for the most part ufology, is that everybody borrows everybody's story and says it's mine. Just like when I came out with my book, George and Nora, something like Nagasaki or something, but he came out and adopted my whole story and said, he was at Groom and he saw the triangle and he was the first one who knew about the magnetic field disruptor. I mean, these guys, they just copy everybody else's stuff.
Right. Yeah, that does happen a lot in ufology.
And they completely keep changing their story. My basic story is in the book and my lecture, and I only gave my lecture to the UFOC in 98, 99, MUFON 99, once in Sacramento, I think late 99. I only gave it a handful of times. It wasn't like I was everybody wanted me on the circuit. Hey, you can sell your books and you can get paid. And I was never paid for any interview. Not a penny. I mean, I got free lunches and dinner sometimes, but that was it. So I never made a dime off any of those lectures or interviews. Unlike some people won't talk unless somebody pays them a stipend or something.
Right.
And I mean, I even had, I won't name the names, but I'm ashamed to say, they would say, well, you got to come back, this or that, and give another presentation. I said, I don't have anything new. They said, well, just elaborate or exaggerate. Or I said, you're basically saying make up new stuff so you can have me back on your circuit. And I said, well, and that's what they were saying. And that's why you see so many of these guys, they just keep making up more and more stuff.
Right.
They start off, they saw a UFO. And the next thing, they test a UFO. And the next thing, they're in a hangar, accidentally, there's a UFO. And then the next thing, it's like, oh, that UFO was sitting at Area 51. But they have no credentials showing they had any military, most of them, or documentation And I'm telling you one thing about the military, they're obsessive about documentation.
Right.
Every assignment, the length of assignment, who ordered the assignment or gave permission, every training, every bit of training you've ever had. When you permanently changed from one base to another, conferences you went to, your performance reports, your medals, your awards, they're obsessive about documentation. So for people to say, I have no documentation, it's baloney. You can get a copy of your military records, I believe, out of St. Louis.
Yeah. You hear a lot about above top secret and levels above top secret. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I know from 20 years of having top secret Q clearance, which is as high as you can get, that when you have a top secret clearance that authorizes you to work on programs that are top secret, or Q clearance, anything related to nuclear weapons. Now, once you get that clearance, for example, say you're working on the F-117 when it was top secret at Edwards and Burbank and Groom Air Base, you had to get a special access program clearance, which is usually rubber stamp because you're qualified and they need somebody with your qualifications, so they gave you a special access program code, which is in your records most of the time. Or you have a secret compartmental investigation that goes along with it. Or special background investigation, SBI. I think I made a mistake there somewhere. I don't know where. But anyway, for example, I had a couple of SBIs, special background investigations, that also had like lie detector tests or psychological tests a couple of times. So what you have is you have lateral jobs. The top secret gives you your clearance to work different jobs if you have the training and you're needed in a specific slot. Once you're selected, they'll give you a SCI, a special access program number, and that clears you to work on the equipment.
Right.
So basically, I had several SAPs and SCIs that were awarded me because I worked on different black programs.
Right.
Okay. Even the president has SAPs and SCIs, but a lot of times they're blanket. In other words, it'll be a code that says you're authorized to read information about everything.
Right.
So there is no, I've heard 20 levels above, 27 levels, 30 levels, 32 levels above, and this is made up by people that have no clue how actual clearances work. It's like deans that I had 32 levels or something above cosmic. Well, cosmic is no different in NATO. That's a NATO term than top secret.
Right.
So when he says, oh, I had a cosmic clearance, everybody goes, ooh. All he's saying is I had a top secret clearance.
Yeah. And it's the NATO version of the word top secret.
Exactly.
Okay.
So there's that other myth that goes around and never ends.
The multiple levels of stuff, yeah. And that you can never track my history because all of the stuff that I did is so secret that there'll never be any records of it at all. So I can't actually prove what I'm telling you is true.
Some of the codes I had, equipment or aircraft prototypes and stuff, aren't available on my records. I assume because the plane was never put into production, it just, after that, there was no reference. There was no SAP for that program. So it was just deleted from my records, probably automatically. For example, when I was trying to get my VA disability to cover my health care, I had a Medal of Valor from Vietnam, and I kept telling them I was in Vietnam twice, gave them the months, years. It wasn't part of my records because it was NSA-related assignment. Back then, the NSA wouldn't release any information on anybody.
Okay.
And it wasn't until just a few years ago that they allowed their records of training and jobs to be released. Of course, they redacted anything classified about the job. But most of the time when people write up, for example, your reviews or your medals for promotions or any of that kind of stuff, they know not to write anything that's classified. But people's whole records disappearing is impossible. I mean, these people say, they deleted my diploma. Why? It's not related to anything classified. Like that Lyra, Bursch, and Lazar. Or they don't know their professors in their school. Bob Lazar claimed, I went this professor at MIT, and kind of find out it was from Pierce Junior College. Okay. And only took a couple of courses. Where's your pay stubs? Where's your income tax filing showing where you worked or who you work for? Lazar said he worked for the Department of Naval Intelligence. Well, that hadn't existed since World War II.
Right.